Hello and welcome to the International Mediation Awareness Week podcast. I'm Joanne Law, Regional Coordinator for Australasia. The next IMAW, International Mediation Awareness Week, is on the 7th till the 11th of November 2022. Leading up to that, this podcast will introduce you to regional coordinators, event partners and speakers who'll share with you their insights and passion for mediation. Mediation for every stage of life. Hello and welcome everyone. Today I'm speaking with Claire Holland, who's the Director of the Conflict Management Training at James Cook University in Townsville. Welcome, Claire.
Hello, thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. Can you tell us a
Definitely.
bit more about what you're doing?
Sure. So I think that a lot of the skills associated with conflict management and resolution, they're not actually innate skills. They are skills that need to be learned and developed. And there is a lot of professional development opportunities that people can go out and find to try and work on and increase the skills that they have. And what we offer at James Cook University is actually a master's program. So it's an Australian qualifications framework program that actually dives a little bit deeper into just the skills, but also the underlying theories and understanding of why you do what you do or why people might behave in a certain way and how you can develop the skills to change your initial reaction to conflict into hopefully a more conscious response.
Okay, that's really important, I think, because without a theoretical framework for thinking, sometimes it's easier to blame the other person than recognize, okay, this is what humans do in certain circumstances.
Absolutely. It's training in a whole mind shift sometimes for people. And I experienced that myself. So I actually started out studying a law degree. And after my law degree, which in my 5th year of my law degree, I studied this subject in alternative dispute resolution. And that's where I say I had this moment where I realized, oh, this is like what I really want to do with my life, because seeing this collaborative paradigm, which is quite distinct from the adversarial paradigm that you're taught with the law in Australia, I thought, oh my gosh, there's this other way. And so when I did my Masters of Mediation and Conflict Resolution through the University of Queensland at the time, they had an Australian Centre for Peace and Conflict Studies, I experienced this complete mind shift and an awareness of the way in which collaborative approaches, dialogue, supportive guided processes can assist people not just in their kind of current behavior, but the thinking behind their behavior and actually lead to really sustainable outcomes.
Absolutely. And I really like that you're talking about dispute resolution in a much broader context, because sometimes we look at mediation as this intervention where you bring people together and work on whatever the issues are, but really the broader, longer term changes in dynamics between people is where the magic is.
So true. And a lot of that we teach a subject in the master's program called conflict analysis, which is also a really fundamental skill, I think, for any conflict resolution practitioner to really map out and understand what's going on with the conflict, to then be able to better support the participants or the client that you're working with to also fully understand exactly what's going on from multiple perspectives, applying a range of different layers of theories and understanding to be able just to think more holistically about what might be the next best option or a process of engagement that you could use moving forward.
Oh, that's really interesting. Can you explain a little bit more about how mapping for those that are listening? So
Sure.
how would that
So
work?
the conflict mapping is a bit of a structured process where you really sit down and think about, so who are the parties, but not just maybe the primary parties, but who are the secondary parties or other intervening parties or other parties who might be interested in the outcome, but not actually involved in the decision making. So once you map all that out, you can think about, oh, okay, just what's the scope of who's involved? And then what's a bit about the history and the relationship between the parties? Has there been good relationships in the past, or what were triggering events that might have caused behaviour that has somehow contributed to the situation where you currently are at? and then deeper analysis into the different aspects of conflict, whether or not those triggering events were based on relationship issues or the values or data structure. So that Moore's circle of conflict, underlying theories, whether it's just at an individual level, it's at an organizational level, community, national. So where's that sitting? What has been the communication in the past? Has there been conflict avoidance? What behaviors? And then even thinking a little bit about the neuroscience behind how people might be thinking and feeling in conflict and how that might be influencing their behavior. So there's quite a few specific elements to a conflict map. And in the subject that we teach a particular approach, so you get your whole list of subheadings. It's just a very structured way to be able to sit down and think about what's really going on.
Absolutely. And it sounds like it would be a huge benefit for people, whether they're in an organisation, in a HR or leadership role. Let's have a bigger picture view.
And then what tends to fall out the end is you then think about, then what's the most appropriate response? And sometimes mediation is really appropriate when a situation is ripe for the mediation intervention and the parties are ready. And that focus on resolution is quite important. But there often are other aspects to the conflict that will be ongoing over time that mediation or another dispute resolution process isn't suitable for. And that's where that aspect of conflict management comes in as opposed to conflict resolution. How can you support people to come up with an ongoing conflict management plan for what is likely to occur? And I think to a certain aspect, family dispute resolution sometimes requires that more focus around conflict management plans. There might be little resolutions along the way, but it's a bit more of an ongoing long-term management of the situation.
Definitely can be. I guess that's the distinction with conflict as opposed to a dispute, where a dispute might be something that's erupted in the moment, but the conflict is that ongoing undercurrent. And in the case of parents where they're competing for the time and attention of their child, for example, if focus is competitive rather than on how can we best work together to raise our child.
Sometimes it's even just with the awareness that there's going to be other triggering events throughout the relationship. So when the child moves from preschool to primary school, that's a big decision-making point where there's the potential for conflict. When they move then into high school, when they have to make decisions around the international school trip. So you can almost map some of those potential conflict events that are going to occur over the life cycle of the conflict.
Absolutely, which once again helps people to understand that this is the nature of conflict rather than just the other person being bad. Okay, so this is the International Mediation Awareness Week podcast. But in some ways, we're using mediation as a word for that broader conflict management. So a lot of the speakers that we're going to have this year will be talking about these more holistic programs, bringing in coaching and bringing in team facilitation and things like that. So is that the sort of things that you talk about as well in your masters?
Yeah, absolutely. So in previous International Mediation Awareness Week presentations that I've given, I've spoken about the mediator toolkit and just the importance of having a broad range of skills and knowledge that then you can bring to mediation practice. But by having training in negotiation makes you a better mediator, and then having mediation training makes you a better conflict coach, and having conflict coaching training makes you a better group facilitator. Having facilitation training means that you're more able to work in cross-cultural settings. Like, everything is so complementary and also very interlinked in terms of the skill base for that practitioner who wants to support parties who are in conflict. Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for having a very broad range of skills and knowledge and of participating in ongoing continual professional development, just to ensure that sort of toolbox that you've got means that, if something's happening in the room when you're actually doing a particular process, you have those skills to be able to pivot or to pull something out that's going to be of benefit to the clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's one of the key distinctions and skills that we have as dispute resolution professionals, that ability to do what's needed in the moment. And the only way to know that is to have that base of theory and also tools as you put them. So, yeah, sometimes it might be, okay, we need to have a talk about values here or something like that, when you can see, okay, your analysis has brought up that these people are really in conflict and going to continue in conflict because they've got a real values clash and they're not seeing it, as an example. In the past, the universities hosted panel discussions, which have been really, really interesting. Can you share a little bit more about how those have worked?
The sort of students who come to study the Masters of Conflict Management Resolution at JCU tend to be mid to late career, who are either moving up within sort of management or team leader positions, taking on more responsibilities, and are then having to deal with either more conflict in the workplace or managing staff that are having to deal with conflict. And so when our students graduate, they're in the most amazing roles and positions around Australia, working across healthcare, education, defence, government organisations, individual practitioners. We've had chefs and nurses. The conflict is just everywhere.
Yeah.
One of the other features of the program is that we focus on the people who are teaching the programs being academics. So they're practitioners themselves who also have that underlying theoretical understanding of what they're doing, so can give the breadth of content and background, but also their own practical experience. So when we pull these panels together, we're so lucky to be able to draw on a wide range of graduates, current students, the academics who are lecturing in the program, just to be able to share skills, stories, experiences. Because a great benefit, I think, of having the types of events that the International Mediation Awareness Week offers is hearing the stories from other people and practitioners that you might not usually be exposed to, and going, that's really interesting how they do that over there. Maybe I could bring some of that into my practice. And oh, what an interesting perspective of how that's applied in that context. Maybe we could try that in our context.
Yeah. Oh, look, absolutely. And I think that's really the critical value and what we're trying to bring with the International Mediation Awareness Week, because often with conflict, people just think, oh, there's nothing we can do. There's usually something that can be done.
We always say people have at least two choices. They've got the choice to do nothing or the choice to do something. And that choice to do something could be very varied.
Yeah.
But even if you choose to do nothing, it's still a choice.
But only if you think like that and consciously make that choice. Generally, there's a number of things that you can do that might improve the situation or reduce the stress associated with conflict. Living ongoing in conflict is quite stressful for most people.
Yeah. There's a certain amount of what we call latent conflict that families are prepared to live with, societies are prepared to live with, workplaces are prepared to live with. And it's only when that latent conflict, there's a triggering event that escalates it, that people go, no, this is more than we're prepared to live with. And the issues can occur. And if there is a really effective resolution or management, it is possible for that return to your baseline. You can actually reduce the level of latent conflict that does exist.
Yeah.
And it does go up and down depending on societal values, family values, but even sometimes that awareness that, yeah, actually we've all generally accepting this level of conflict in the workplace.
Yeah.
Are we happy to continue to accept this, or do we want to do something? And even sometimes just that awareness of what it is that exists can be quite transformational for people.
Oh, absolutely, because in a lot of workplaces, there's structural conflict where it's basically built into the system that people will be in conflict. And without recognizing that, individuals can be blamed where it's actually structural. Like they can't not.
True.
They just can't not be in conflict. I think there's always a way. There's always a way. And maybe through innovation, through redesign and reallocation of resources, there's always a way to improve things. Often the people that are part of the problem are too close to see the opportunities. And that's what we do as dispute resolution professionals, create that space to look at things differently.
Yeah, benefit of a third party perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned perspective. It's a really important aspect of dispute resolution. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think now with my personal mediation practice, I do court appointed mediations that are very specific problem solve processes with the view of trying to support parties to reach a resolution so they don't have to go through the risk, the cost, the time delays, uncertainty of going to court. Then I also do get to do community-based mediations, which are a lot more facilitative, where you can explore the relationships, the communication, and what's really going on. And I found the benefit of combining the coaching post mediations to support the parties with that continued integration of the agreements
Mhm.
or the behavior changes that they've committed to during the mediation, really beneficial and important, because that perspective taking and then I guess new perspective integration into their
Mm.
lives, expecting that to occur after a 3-hour mediation and then great, okay, off you go, you've got this now,
Yeah.
is a little bit unrealistic. And so recognizing that ongoing support is often needed for that, perspective shift to really
Mm.
occur and integrate into people's realities.
Yeah. Look, that makes sense because we all know that change requires repetition and,
Yeah.
and establishing new patterns and replacing the old ones. So having that ongoing support with a coach who understands these concepts is going to be really valuable. So how would you define mediation?
I think there's a few criteria that makes mediation distinct from other processes.
Hmm.
And so in the framework that I work in, I tend to define mediation for what it is as well as distinct from other processes,
Mm.
so what it's not.
Yes.
So, like direct negotiation, for example, is where you have the conversations with another party and you might have different representatives to support those conversations, but there's no independent third person who's assisting with the communication of that conversation. And a facilitation would be maybe a group conversation, but you might have more than 5 people. So you could have a workplace, so you've got 20, 50, you can have a facilitation up to 200 people. So mediation is that sweet spot in between where you tend to have two parties generally. There might be more, but generally two parties. They have the assistance of an independent third party who is able to help by guiding the parties through a process to assist them to have a good conversation. So it's about communication, ensuring that the parties are able to express their side of the story, feel like they've been listened to, and also then for the other party to actually hear what is being said. And so, almost like a bit of an interpreter, the mediator can often assist with that communication to be really aware, is good communication occurring in this situation? And as that communication is occurring, is this process supporting the parties get to have the conversation that they need to have in this moment, that they've articulated is their goal? So that's your agenda, so that you can get to an outcome that's going to move everyone forward. And I guess the ultimate goal of mediation is that there is a positive outcome for the parties, even if it's just greater awareness of what the situation is now from more perspectives. Maybe there is an agreement about what the parties are going to do together moving forward, or at least the parties can make more informed choices about what they're going to do themselves moving forward.
Excellent. I think you've thought about this before, Claire.
Daily.
It shows. And it's really interesting how you've highlighted that the outcome of a mediation doesn't necessarily have to be an agreement. Often it might be more awareness. It might be, okay, I understand the situation now. I can make some choices, which may be, actually, I'm not going to keep working here, or I'm going to make make different not together choices, but
Yeah,
that can be an outcome that's going to be appropriate for those people. So, yeah,
absolutely.
that's very nicely explained. So, have you seen changes happening over the last couple of years with COVID? Certainly, where I am down in Victoria, we're seeing a lot more conflict than there was in all sorts of areas. Are you quarantined up there in North Queensland?
Oh, we've been very lucky with our COVID experience. We didn't get anything near like Victoria. And I can, completely appreciate what you're saying about the rise in conflict. I think sometimes there's lots of different factors and lots of different things that contribute to these types of things. But when people are well rested and physically healthy, they're more likely to be able to engage in creative thinking and to have good conversations. And when people are approaching fatigue, burnout, exhaustion, and that emotional contagion of everything that's happening around you, that creativity doesn't come as easily, and the conversations aren't as respectful. They're not just people just don't have the capacity to think and engage in good communication. If you're in survival mode, it's very hard to think empathetically towards other people because you just need to look after yourself. So I think there's some very real reasons why there is this sort of challenge at the moment for people who have gone through really traumatic events over the last few years, and that sort of survival mode instinct, just even with currently like the economic uncertainty, which leads to job uncertainty, which leads to family uncertainty. There's only so much uncertainty that people can grasp and hang on to. Even things like environmental uncertainty that we're living in.
Yeah.
We've got global conflict uncertainty. All of that weighs on people, whether you think it does or not. It creates a bit of a lens through which interactions occur. And yeah, it's just a very challenging time for a lot of people at the moment.
Yeah. And do you think with greater awareness of some of these external forces or contributors to the not even conflict level, anxiety level, do you think greater awareness can help people to manage or put in strategies?
Yeah, awareness is one key aspect because it can at least help people recognize why things are so challenging at the moment for
Mm.
themselves and why their responses might not be what they expect from themselves. Like
Yes.
sometimes you've had a conversation, you've walked away and gone, why did I say that? That is
Yeah.
so unlike me. I would never normally behave in that way. So
Mm.
that awareness can maybe help for that. But unless that baseline of safety and security is really addressed, it's still quite challenging, I think, for people to have these higher order
Yeah.
conversations around like respect in the workplace when you're like, I don't know if I can afford groceries next week, or like there's lots of other things going on. So until some of the structural issues are addressed, in addition to that awareness, it's a balance between, I think, individual responsibility and organizational and societal responsibility.
Mm.
And a big challenge is when a lot of the rhetoric comes out and says that it's a responsibility of the individual to look after
Mm.
themselves and manage
Yeah.
their own responses. And
Yes.
you're responsible for your own happiness. You're responsible for your own
Yeah.
communication style. You're responsible for your own this. Yeah, but some responsibilities in the bubble within which we need to operate as individuals as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but I'm trying to keep my head above water. I'm not standing on solid ground.
Yeah.
And as you're speaking, it brings back to that really old model as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And in rich countries like Australia, those basic survival needs are generally not challenged, but a lot of people have actually had that challenge or thought about being challenged
Yeah,
in that way, perhaps first time in their lives. So
absolutely.
that leaves a legacy as well.
Yeah, so true. Another organization that I'm a member of is the Mediators Beyond Borders Oceania group.
Mm.
And that's also looking at ways in which to support people with structured, sort of peaceful dialogue around challenges that are being met by people across borders often. But at the moment, a lot of that has also come down to sort of safety and security and a lot of environmental issues
Mm.
that are needing to be managed so that people have that understanding of safety and security and decisions that are being made about their livelihoods, about their living conditions, really core factors that can influence
Absolutely. If
people's lives.
your homes or your fields are being inundated, it's not theoretical. That's survival.
Very real. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so that must be really interesting work. How does Mediators Beyond Borders work in practice?
Great. So there's an organisation, Mediators Beyond Borders International, which takes a global perspective of, ways in which you can promote the peaceful dialogue. It's mediated, non-adversarial, collaborative sort of conflict resolution to issues. And this idea that sometimes skills and knowledge from the way in which things are done in other areas can inform and enrich the way in which
Mm.
processes are being managed in different countries.
Mm.
So I attended like the National Mediation Conference last year in Australia, and one of the presenters talked beautifully about this basket of knowledge that by contributing from the way in which different
Mm.
people do things, it can better inform sort of local processes. So the idea of Talanoa in Fiji and how that works can maybe inform how circle work is done in the Solomon Islands. It can better inform how in Australia we manage some of our like restorative justice processes. It's just that really rich sort of sharing of examples, case studies, experiences, skills, knowledge across borders.
Yeah. And really, with Oceania, probably you find there's a lot more intact original dispute resolution processes in places where colonisation's been less harsh
Yeah.
than others. So there's a lot to be learned, as you're saying, which is really exciting.
Yeah. Then the challenges can be a little bit around those cross-cultural conflict elements where you
Mm.
might have a mining company that's come in and has the international values and views on a situation,
Yes.
and then there's conflict with local community members, which might go down to individual families. So how does their capacity to engage in a process or have a voice at the table, what does that look like when those
Mm.
parties are what we might consider in the theory there's quite a big power imbalance?
Yes.
How do things like that work, and has it worked well in the past in other regions, and what could lessons
Mm.
could be learned?
Yeah. Oh, look, absolutely. There's another podcast with one of the speakers from the International Mediation Awareness Week of work that's been done in that area in South America, and the same thing, because looping back to that perspective taking that we talked about, an executive from a mining company may not understand that a certain piece of land or area of land has a spiritual identity that has to be protected. For them, it's
Absolutely.
just land, but for the local people, it's not. It's not just a piece of land.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating, and I'm sure that brings those sorts of insights would feed back into what you're doing in your training with the university as well.
Absolutely.
Really. I suppose it loops back again of just the more perspectives that we have, the more ways of looking at the world and how we interact. It improves our ability, or everyone's ability, to work together, to get along, to be respectful, and hopefully reduce that level of latent conflict down to something that's more closely resembling peace, which is certainly my goal and ambition.
We talk about not just gaining peace, but also gaining an understanding of positive conflict engagement.
Mm.
So, conflict is inevitable. There will always be conflict,
Yeah.
but the way in which conflict is approached and the way in which it is managed means it can either be a positive or a negative experience. So, you hope to support, I think, the skill building of people to engage in positive conflict engagement for when conflict occurs,
Yeah.
and yeah, just ensure that the conversations are good, that because you're always going to have those clash of ideas, the clash of values, not having enough resources to meet everyone's needs. And so how do you manage those conversations in a way that can actually come up with outcomes that are best suited to, again, the situations, to as many people involved as possible, and yeah, proactively manages conflict. So I don't think peace is like the absence of conflict, it's managing conflict positively.
Absolutely. But I suppose the distinction is, how long does the conflict, that particular conflict, when a conflict arises, is it avoided? Everyone walks around it, even though
Yeah.
it's poisoning the water, so to speak. Or do they engage with it, look at why is this happening? What are the possible remedies? And too often when people don't feel equipped to deal with it, the instinct is to avoid it.
Mm. Yeah.
It's there, but we're not going to talk about it. We're not
Yeah.
going to deal with it. But if conflict's there, it makes itself known.
Absolutely. There's actually a really fabulous example from Dominic Barter, who's a restorative justice practitioner in the United States, where he said that we grow up in houses where we know that people need to eat. So in any dwelling in the world, there'll be a food preparation space.
Yeah.
And we grow up knowing that we need rest. So
Mm.
again, in any dwelling, there's a place for sleep or a bedroom or something. We know that as human beings, conflict is inevitable. So in our houses, where is the conflict room? Like, where is the room where we learn to have positive conflict engagement within the family? Like, where is our strategies and skills that we're learnt and we're taught from childhood through to then the ripple out into society for this is how we manage conflict around here, and it's a positive experience.
For some people, that used to be the dinner table where those conversations happen, but often now there is no dinner table, or it's not used every day because people in and out.
You hear it everywhere. So yeah, maybe we just need more conflict rooms.
Yeah, conflict room. That's right. I wonder if we have prayer rooms and we have other things in businesses. Maybe there can be the conflict room as well. You might be onto a new thing. We could keep talking all day, but is there anything else that you really wanted to share with people?
Maybe just again to reiterate that point that the continual ongoing learning, I think, is just so core to being a really good conflict management resolution practitioner, because the information and knowledge that we're gaining now in neuroscience, in communication skills, in understanding how people walk in two worlds when they're walking across different cultures, it's just continually evolving. And so having that knowledge and continually updating it, I think, can just further support people's practice in the future.
I think the thing that prompted me as well when you're talking about that, it isn't necessarily that you're going to be a dispute resolution professional. It really is a skill set that's not innate, that's learned.
Yes.
If you look at any small children, they do not have good conflict resolution skills. I want that. I'm going to take it. I'm hungry. I'm going to scream until someone feeds me.
Yeah.
So they are learned skills. And even if you're not working professionally as a dispute resolution practitioner, if you're working with people, it's well worth considering these skills as part of your professional development plan, I would have thought.
That's actually one thing I often say, is that whenever one person speaks to another person, knowledge of conflict management resolution skills could be beneficial to that interaction. So yeah, spot on the money there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a really good place for us to go. Anyone who's interested in being part of the International Mediation Awareness Week, the website is IMAW.org. And you'll be able to go there. It's completely free. So you're able to register to attend events in Australia, all around the world. And some of the events will be live in person. Are you thinking in person this year or online? What are your thoughts for?
We may be able to have something local in Townsville, which would be great. But then I also think that the fact that we do have the opportunity to be online and just reach such a wide audience has been a really great outcome. We're thinking positively about this pandemic. It's made a lot of information a lot more accessible to people.
Oh, absolutely. It's really been a brilliant opportunity for sharing of knowledge without borders. So thank you so much once again for your time. It's been a delight, and I'm sure those listening will be really interested to hear more of your insights. If people did want to connect with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Please do. If you'd like to know anything more about the Master's or Graduate Certificate program that we offer at James Cook University, you can find us on the website, www.jcu.edu.au/conflict resolution. And if you're interested in Mediators Beyond Borders Oceania, our website's www.mbbo.com.au. And I'm Claire Holland, and you can also find my contact details for both organisations on those sites.
Wonderful. Excellent. So people can replay that if you did on the first time, and I don't think you'll be disappointed if you do reach out to Claire. Okay, thank you so much.